So Satoshi, 16 years ago today, came out with the white paper, October 31st, 2008. So at that time, and you have to keep in mind here that, so just following the timeline here, a couple of years of relevance in Bitcoin. 2008, October 31st, that's when the Bitcoin white paper was released to the public. Fast forward 2 months and a bit, January 3rd, 2009, that's when the very first Bitcoin block was mined as a Genesis block, January 3rd, 2009. So between October 31st and January 3rd, those couple months, that's kind of when they were testing it. So they released the white paper, Satoshi released the white paper, and then they started mining Bitcoin on January the 3rd. So the white paper itself was titled, and this is very important, because if you're new to Bitcoin or somewhat new to Bitcoin, you have to understand what Bitcoin was designed for. So at the title, at the top of the white paper, it said Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Peer-to-peer, cash, right? Not currency or anything like that, but a cash, because words are important in this kind of stuff. So a peer-to-peer electronic cash. So in the white paper, Satoshi described the concept and design of the world's first decentralized digital currency that we know as Bitcoin. And Satoshi himself mined roughly 1 million Bitcoin. 1 million Bitcoin were mined by Satoshi. None of them were ever spent. Imagine that. Imagine having 1 million. So to me, that suggests that they either burned the keys to the wallet, or they're very, very patient or something. 1 million Bitcoin, I don't even know what the value of that is today. A lot. But Satoshi mined 1 million Bitcoin and haven't spent any of them. I think they used a couple to transact with as test transactions. But other than that, the 1 million Bitcoin have sat in that wallet and have not moved. So it's important. It's an important part of Bitcoin to understand that every single Bitcoin that's been put into circulation has been earned through proof of work, right? This isn't like a stock, like an IPO, where they sell to seed investors first, they issue some to their friends and family first, and then they let the public buy it after that. And this isn't like an ICO, like in crypto world, where same thing. They take 50% of the tokens, they give it out to their friends, and then they sell the rest to the public. Every single Bitcoin that's been mined or put into circulation has been earned. And when I say earned, I mean people have either bought them or they have hooked up their miner and earned them through mining. So that's the only two ways to get Bitcoin, right? There's none that were given out. It's important. And that's what makes Bitcoin a commodity versus a security, is the fact that when this thing was rolled out, no Bitcoins were just given out to anybody, because that would define it as a security or part of the Howey test for the security. So Bitcoin's Genesis block wasn't until the 3rd of January 2009, a couple months later, which means they spent months testing and refining the system before the launch. But who is they? So in addition to Satoshi, there were a dozen other people who helped make Bitcoin what it is today. So I'll talk about a couple of them here. There's about 12 people that I found that were involved, but there's 4 kind of memorable ones that are worth talking about, I think. So one of them was Hal Finney. Everybody knows Hal. He was the first person to receive a Bitcoin transaction. There was Adam Back, who invented Hashcash, which is what Bitcoin's proof of work protocol was based on. So if you watched the documentary a couple weeks ago, Adam Back was there in the early days and then kind of gave up on Bitcoin, or that's the story anyways, that's how the story goes, and came back in 2013. So he invented Hashcash, which is part of the proof of work aspect of Bitcoin, but then just kind of went away for a couple of years and came back in 2013 and started getting active in the messages again. Nick Szabo created BitGold, which was the precursor to Bitcoin. There was a lot of precursors to Bitcoin, about 40 years worth of work, documented work that led to Bitcoin, but BitGold was a big part of that. Gavin Andresen became the lead developer after Satoshi stepped away in 2010. So that's kind of the timeline there. 2008, the white paper was released to the public. 2009, the first Bitcoin was mined, the Genesis block. And then in 2010, that's when Satoshi walked away. And the last message he sent wasn't anything of substance. It was just talking about security. And so he didn't say goodbye. There was no grand finale or exit. He just kind of left. But this is the cool one for me, is that most people think that Satoshi was Japanese because of the name Satoshi Nakamoto. But based on the spelling, if you look at the message boards, some of the spelling would suggest that they might have been Canadian. They spelled color, COLOUR, which is how you spell it in Canada here. Gray, also Canadian spelling, GREY. And the forum activity, or that might not be specific to Canada, but specific to like the West. And the forum activity, whenever he was posting messages, it seemed like it was in the US time zones. So he actually might have been Canadian. I don't know. We'll probably never know. But I think as a Canadian myself, I would be very proud and honored to claim Satoshi as a Canadian. And you don't hear too many people talking about that because I don't think people want him to be a Canadian. But I do. So that's kind of, that's Satoshi. That's the white paper. That's a very brief history of how we got from 16 years ago to today. And I think that Satoshi would be proud. Like in the 16 years, it's went from worthless, no demand, to a plus trillion dollar asset class with a lot of demand for it. And keep in mind that there's no company, there's no CEO, there's no board of directors who makes decisions on what should happen. It's just out there, and there's people who maintain it, and there's people who talk about it, and there's people who educate others on it, and nobody gets paid for it. It's just people who want a better world. So I do think that Satoshi would be very proud of what Bitcoin's turned into. I think so. Sure, there's been some issues along the way, but I mean, how could there not be? And the foresight and vision that Satoshi had for current day and looking out into the future is truly something to behold. And that makes me believe that it wasn't one person, because I don't think that the one person could possibly have the mental capacity to design something like Bitcoin. So I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my thoughts on it.